Welcome back. As you may or may not know, I'm known as Eli, the computer guy. My current project is something called silicondojo.com. Basically, the idea is what if high quality technology education was as accessible as running water? That's what I'm working on, right? So we have self-study courses, and we have Zoom classes, and we have one-on-one conversations. We have a whole bunch of things going on. On that note, if you're watching this in the normal timeline, on Thursday, we're going to have a Zoom session on Moon Dream AI, which is a really cool computer vision model that's come out. We're going to do some interesting projects on that. So take a look at silicondojo.com. Anyways, when I do the one-on-one sessions, so every Monday from 1 to 5 p.m. Eastern time, I do these one-on-one sessions. I sit there and I talk with my students and listen to their problems, which is never what stack to use. They're never like, Eli, should I use AWS or Azure? Should I use Puppet or Ansible? These are never the questions that I get. I get much more prosaic questions. Questions such as how to deal with technical job interviews as a neurodivergent person. Right? So I get these questions quite a bit, and so I do these videos to try to answer those questions. So maybe you don't have to do a whole one-on-one session or whatever else. We put the knowledge out there. So this is a question that I get actually quite a bit. So I talk about being on the spectrum. I'm somewhere on the spectrum. I'm no longer an Aspie. People say, Eli, how do you know that you're an Aspie? And I actually know for a fact that I'm not actually an Aspie, because after I found out I was an Aspie, they took away the designation of being an Aspie, which I just feel like, as a Gen X Aspie, I just feel like that's how my life works. It's like, oh wow, I figured out what's wrong with me. And then they just take the whole designation away. And you're like, bah. Anyways, right? I got some mental issues. What does they say? That you think differently. It's not necessarily that you're disabled. That's what they say. It's how you think differently. All kinds of different things there. Anyway, so I talk about this quite a bit. And so I get questions, right? How do you deal with the technology world as a neurodivergent person, especially when you go into the world and there's so many neurotypical people there that are the gatekeepers. They're the gatekeepers to the cat farms, which is kind of weird. It's like we have a weird profession. We're like the people that make the profession valuable, the people that actually bring the value to the profession are kind of batshit crazy cats, honestly. But then the people that act as the gatekeepers to the profession are the neurotypical people that can't deal with batshit crazy cats all day. Which is kind of just this weird, again, it's how the world actually works. So anyways, one of the first things we think about if you're a neurodivergent person. So we talk about neurodivergent basically means your brain works differently than other people's does. So one of the things with me being an Aspie, that I'm not an Aspie, anyways, is I am not able to intuit. So I was informed, I have been informed, there's this thing humans do called nonverbal communication, and that by magic, apparently, most people do this subconsciously. So somewhere between 50 to 90% of all human communication is nonverbal. And yeah, I wasn't given that module when I was popping out. Didn't exist for me, right? And so that's one of the issues that I have. Or again, it's not necessarily even a bad thing. It can be a good thing, can be a bad thing, can be a bad thing most of the time, because if I am not paying attention, I miss just a huge amount of communication that's occurring. Again, how people look at you, how people respond, all of that kind of stuff, right? And so for me, even when I'm around family or whatever, if I'm around people for like a whole day, I've basically got to go in a hole for a few hours and just not deal with anything at all. Because when I deal with nonverbal communication, I actually do it at a conscious level. So what is supposed to be going on in the background, not burning very many of your neural resources for most people, unfortunately for me, happens in the foreground, which burns a hell of a lot of brain power, right? That's one of the things for me. The interesting part about that, though, being a technology professional, one of the ways that things can be bad, but also good, right? So it's bad because for nonverbal communication, I really have to pay attention and it really burns me out pretty quick. The good part is, though, when you're in a highly stressful environment and everybody's losing their mind, but they're not telling you about it, I was like, back when I used to do technical work, like the actual troubleshooting and all that, people would come up to me and like, oh my God, Eli, how do you deal with the stress? Everybody's like shooting daggers into your back, with their eyeballs. I'd be like, and I look around, like, oh, really? Oh, I hadn't noticed. Anyways, I got work to do. Right? Anyways, that's what we talk about with neurodivergence. Again, you may be ADHD, you may be OCD, you may be any of the number of designations that still exist. But basically, for whatever reason, your brain doesn't work the way other folks' brains do. And so one of the issues that you get into is you go out there to do job interviews, and it can be very difficult because many of the times the people, especially you're doing your initial interviews with, are what are called neurotypical people or normies, right? And so you go in there and it can be just a very weird experience, a very weird experience. Because that's the thing, is like the normies want to make money just like everybody else does, but they don't necessarily have the brain power or the whatever to actually make valuable things. And so that's where they glom on. They glom on and they go into HR. They can understand HR. They glom on and they become a recruiter. They don't understand the difference between JavaScript and Java, but they do understand what a commission is, right? Anyways, and so then you sit there having to deal with these people, and it can be an abject nightmare. So anyways, the first thing to realize with your neurodiversity is I'm going to say something that I do not think has been said to people for the past 2 decades, which is a sad thing. Nobody gives a damn about your crap. I think this is one of the big issues that we've gotten into in this whole modern world, is again, identitarianism. Everybody wants an identity, right? They want to be alpha dogs, or they want to be trans, or they want to be stoic, or they want to be Aspies, or they want to be something else. And one of the big things with that is the idea that other people should interact with you based upon the identity that you have. And again, I actually put alphas and trans right beside each other. Same, but not very different. And a lot of people might be horrified by that. But think about what they, both sides or both of those folks are trying to do at the end of the day. They're trying to say, this is what I am, and I expect you to interact with me based off of how I'm identifying, right? And here's the thing. People don't care. They don't care that you're an Aspie. They don't care that you have OCD. They don't care that you want to be a dog or whatever else. They are going to interact with you based off of their needs and their desires and a whole bunch of other things, right? When we talk about identity, the important thing to understand with identity, the real value in understanding your identity is to understand why you are effing up when you interact with other people. Right? When you go out to interact with other people and it turns into a shit show and you're not quite sure why your identity is important is to go, oh, this is why things are difficult for me, right? I had a girlfriend who was dyslexic way back in the day. Decades ago at this point. Anyways, and she was saying like when she looked at a book, right, the words would literally move around in the book. Like when she said when she looked at a cat, she didn't see a cat. She saw a tail and a head and a body. That was all in the realm of what you might consider a cat. Her brain just did not process visual cues the way my brain processes visual cues. And so I think one of the big things we run into right now is that people are like, I'm dyslexic, ergo you have to interact with me in a certain way. I'm an Aspie, ergo you have to interact with me in a certain way. Frankly, I'm a trans, and you've got to interact with me in a certain way. And what I want you to understand is nobody cares about your crap. And it was cute. It was cute when we were in the era of 1% interest rates. So we talk about with 1% interest rates is after we had the Great Recession, the economy never fixed itself after the Great Recession. It's why it's one of the reasons we're in a kerfuffle now. I don't think we're in a recession now. We're in a kerfuffle. We're in this... It's not how it should be, but it's not quite that either. It's just a crap show. So anyways, right, we had the Great Recession, the economy exploded. They were trying to recover the economy, and so the idea is that they drove the interest rates, the government drove the interest rates down to 1%. So if you're a high net worth individual, you could basically take a loan out for 1%, somewhere around 1% interest rate, and then you could put that money somewhere else in order to get a better, what's called a rate of return, in order for you to make money, right? So I pull out money at 1% because money is cheap, and I then put that into a house. Houses are increasing by 20% per year. That means I'm profiting by 19% per year simply by taking money from the government, putting money into house, sitting back and making a crap ton of money, right? Anyways, one of the big problems we run into in the tech world is the tech world stagnated a while ago. I'm sorry to tell you all this, and I know we got AI and that kind of crap going on right now. The technical world stagnated probably about 2015. If you really want to look at it, probably stagnated about 2015. The thing is, though, is people have it in their heads that you can get exponential growth out of technology companies, right? You can go from a stock being worth, $1 to being worth $100 basically overnight, right? If something takes off. You look at Facebook was down at $20 a share, $20 a share back when it came out. Now it's up at $600 a share, right? That's huge X return. Nvidia, right? It was at, again, $20 or something a share not that long ago. And now it's up to like $1,000 a share, something like that, right? So the idea is you can have these huge returns. And so people wanted to invest into tech companies because they thought maybe they could just make huge returns essentially for doing nothing. So these tech companies that basically stagnated almost a decade ago at this point. And so they're trying to prove to these investors why they're successful, why they should get this investment money, right? And again, if you don't have good profit and you don't have good revenue, you don't have good user stats, you basically stagnated, all those other kinds of things. So one of the questions that comes up is basically how can you find some kind of metric that the investors are going to be interested in? And so the idea is if we're growing, if we're adding employees, obviously it means we're successful, ergo you should invest in us. Right? And so we've had about a decade, right, where these companies were hiring employees literally just to hire employees. So you walk in with your badge and an identity, whether you're a dog or whether you're an Aspie, you make loud and proud, right? A lot of the employers out there, they didn't care. They didn't care, but they smiled, because they really needed your ass in a seat. They needed asses in seats. Like I literally talked with one startup founder about 2 years ago, and when I asked him what his major problem was as a real startup, right, real funded, good idea, customers, revenue, real startup founder, one of his biggest problems was that the major tech companies were literally hiring people just to take them off the board. Again, if you want to understand how brutal our industry really can be, the Googles, the Facebooks, the Alphabets of the world, they were literally hiring employees just to take them off the table so that, a startup can't kill your company if the startup can't get the resources, the employees, to actually build their damn product, right? That's a real thing. So you walk in and you're pretty smart in whatever it is that you're doing, and you might be able to add value to a competitor. And again, they're going to ignore a lot of stuff because, again, they're not hiring you. They're just taking you off the table. And so that's one of the things that I've seen a lot with our industry over the past decade, is this whole identitarianism really becoming embedded in our field, because so many people that were getting hired, again, this kind of crap kind of went through. The important thing to understand, though, is that nobody cares. And when I say that, that sounds so horrible. Oh my God, Eli, you're just snarky and cruel and mean. You're just a broken down old white guy. I'm a broken down middle-aged white guy. But anyways, no, think about this. How much do you care about anybody on your team? How much do you actually know and give a crap about your peers? Again, one of the things I'll ask, right? We're supposed to treat people like people like people. What do you know about your boss? What do you know about the personal issues your boss is going through? Do you know if your boss's kids have drug problems? Do you know if your boss's parents, are losing their minds with dementia or whatever else? Do you know? Probably not, because, wait for it, you don't care. And I think that's the funny thing. We're in this weird, I've talked about this before. We are in the weirdest world where everybody wants to talk, but literally nobody wants to listen. They talk about that now. We have more books being published than ever and fewer people reading them, which is kind of a metaphor for the modern world. So anyways, and just think about that. And so when you have your identity, OCD, dyslexia, this, that, or the other thing, the important thing that I want you to be thinking about is basically internalizing that and understanding where that causes problems for when you're interacting with people. Again, as I've talked about that with myself, people say I'm a good listener. I'm not a good listener. I'm just a horrible talker. Again, have you listened to humans? What the fuck are they talking about half the time? I don't even think they understand what's coming out of their mouth. You know what? It's really hard. It's really hard to sit there and listen to people and come up with a good response, and they don't even know what they're talking about. And so it turns into a bit of a disaster. So that's one of the things that I find. I sit back and I just listen a lot of times, unless I feel confident with what I'm saying, unless I really understand what's going on, or at least I need to do the verbal smackdown, right? Just sit back and listen, right? Because you are smart until you prove otherwise, right? Again, it's things like, understanding how people communicate. Again, for me, I've learned nonverbal communication. Again, I consciously process nonverbal communication. So if you meet me, a lot of people meet me, they're like, Eli, you can't be an ass beat. You're so good with people. One, not really. Two, my God, it takes a lot of energy. Can I go back to the server room, please? I would rather go back to the server room, right? But it's skills that I've learned. And so one of the things to be thinking about, again, with your identity, with your neurodivergence, is basically, what is it about your neurodivergence that is causing you issues interacting with the normal world? And then what do you need to do to try to mitigate the effects of that disability? And that's another thing that we're not supposed to say anymore. Eli, it's not a disability. It's a, whatever the fuck they call it. It's a disability. Somebody gets their leg chopped off, it's a disability. It doesn't mean they should go commit suicide or something. It doesn't mean that they can't have kids. It doesn't mean they can't get married. It doesn't mean they can't have a career. But if they get their leg chopped off, they're probably not going to go into the Olympics for running. Maybe they will. I mean, there is some new technology out there nowadays, right? But it's a disability. And that's one of the things to be thinking about. It's with your disability. Because that's one of the weird things, too. It's like with this identity and neurodivergence, right? There used to be bullying. Again, I was there for that generation. It wasn't that long ago. Bullying. And so the outside world would bully you, and you would bully yourself. Again, remember, when I was growing up, it was on the edge. It was getting to be on the edge. But it was still considered cool that if your kid was scared of swimming, you could chuck your kid you could literally throw your kid in the deep end and go, work is done. Oh, things have changed. I don't know if they've changed enough, but they have changed. Anyways, and so bullying is bad. Bullying is bad. But then again, and yourself, don't bully yourself. Other people shouldn't bully you. Then you have acceptance, right? Acceptance is you coming to terms with your issues. I need to accept the disability that I have. I need to come to terms with what that means when I interact with the rest of the world. And then I need to understand, again, what mitigation strategies I need to take in order to deal with the rest of the world. All right, you got the middle ground. Again, that's where Gen X was. Like, oh, that's my problem. That's why I'm kind of fucked up. All right. But everything has to go poorly. We can't. You just never stop at the middle ground anymore. Now we've got into this pride crap. Pride. I'm not disabled. I'm handy capable. No, you're not. Because the problem is, once you start taking pride in it, then it becomes like this valuable thing. I'm proud of my X, Y, or Z. And again, think about this going into an employment environment. Because like that's the thing. Like if you come into an employment environment and it's like you have dyslexia, right? Okay, you have dyslexia. What are you going to need to do to mitigate that in an employment environment? Or what do you need to specifically request in order to help mitigate, right? That's one thing. The problem is when you start having pride for having dyslexia. I'm a proud dyslexic. It's like, crap. Because then you're not really seeing it as a disability anymore. You're not seeing it as a problem. You think this is a benefit. And I, as an employer, am looking at the 1,000 resumes that I got. Thunk. Back. Now I've got 999 resumes. Right? One of those things to consider. Again, like if you're an Aspie and you're like, and I see this with, again, a lot of my students, right? Eli, again, this whole like I'm shy, I'm an introvert. Eli, I'm an introvert. Oh, how do you expect me to go out to events and meetups? How do you expect me to do office politics? I'm an introvert. It's like, well, you can either do it or you can fail miserably. Again, if you ask me as an introvert, what are the steps that I can take to mitigate the physical pain that I feel when I'm going to events, right? I can talk about that, right? Again, I used to be, it was horrible. It was miserable. And so that's one of the things I say. Like when I go to events, I don't try to meet 30 people. When I go to an event, I meet one or I meet two people. Because it gets more comfortable, right? The more you know somebody, but you go to an event, the more you can be with one person, the easier it is to talk. So again, if you say, I'm an introvert and it's painful to go to these things, it's like, okay, find one person. All you have to do is talk to one person, not 20, not 50, not get 1,000 business cards, talk to one person. That's one way you can help mitigate the pain. The other way you can mitigate the pain is to come up with open-ended questions. 10 to 20 open-ended questions that, again, you can allow them to talk. See? Oh, it's painful for you to talk to other people? All you gotta do is say these 10 words in a line like a human being does, and then sit back and you will be amazed how long people talk. And again, that's something you can do to mitigate what's going on. You know, I talk about that like when I drink alcohol. Not here in Nashville because I got beer. I like my beer. Anyways, but like I was just in Miami, right? I go and I get like a thing of whiskey, right? So I get a neat thing of whiskey, but I don't actually drink a lot. It's like there in my hand. It's got that nice alcohol smell. I put it to my lips. I put just a drop on my lips, so it's almost like I'm drinking it. Literally, I can go through 2 or 3 hours and drink half of one shot or glass or whatever of whiskey or whatever. And again, I'm there, I'm part of it, I've got my hands doing something, I feel like I'm drinking, other people feel like I'm drinking, and right, these are mitigation strategies. If I know that I am disabled in some way, and I know this disability is causing me issues when I interact with the world, then what steps can I take to mitigate my disability? And that is what you get when you admit that you're disabled and you don't start in this whole handy capable crap, right? And why this becomes important is we start talking about things like job interviews, right? So you go out and you go to the job interview. One of the big issues that you have to understand right now is there's so many people trying to get jobs. Again, apparently we're not in a recession. Under Biden, we weren't under a recession, and under Trump, we're not under a recession. It's getting harder to afford a house and harder to afford food and harder to afford medical. And it's getting harder to get a job and more people are getting laid off. But it's not a recession. It's important that you understand that. But anyways, whatever we are, this economic kerfuffle, there's more and more people out there trying to get jobs, right? And again, I had one of my students, and they were talking about this, and they were saying how dispiriting it was because they had put out like 1,000 resumes. They're like, Eli, I put out 1,000 resumes and I didn't get any response back. And again, in this whole thing, I'm supposed to sympathize with them because they think that's how the game is played. I'm teacher. I created Silicon Dojo. I'm doing this kind of stuff. Student, teacher. It's like, oh, right. Okay, you put out 1,000 resumes. One of the things that I think about with that, though, having been an employer with my own business, and the whole 9 yards, hanging out with CEOs, the rest of it, is if you put out 1,000 resumes, that means some poor bastard was on the other side and got 1,000 resumes, right? So back when I had my thing, I get 50 to 100 resumes. And I've talked about that. One of the reasons I've talked about authorityless, gatekeeperless system for Silicon Dojo is I remember when I got resumes, and I've been working like 13 hours and I was really tired and everybody called me an idiot, right? The employees weren't doing what the fuck they were supposed to do. The customers were being a pain in the ass. Anyways, right? And so again, you pull out the resume and you look at the name and you're like, how can the entire name be consonants? And again, you just kind of sit there for a moment, like 13 hours, and you're just looking, working, you're just exhausted, right? And you're like, no, but seriously, how is every letter in this person's name a consonant? How do you? And so then you take a minute because you're kind of giddy because you're tired. And you try to say it. And then do you know what you do? Fuck it. You want to know why? Because I got 100 resumes. Now I'm down to 99 resumes. And you go through. And you go through. Then again, the reality. I'm the only damn one around, I'll be honest. People with too many consonants in their names probably are going to have a harder time getting jobs. Not supposed to say it, but again, that's why we build Part of the systems that you create as you get older is you should realize when you were an asshole, when you were in a position of power, and then try to, again, mitigate that kind of crap from happening in the future. So now, you could have 100 letters in your name, all freaking consonants, and you can still learn Python, you can still learn SQL, you can still come to a Zoom class, right? But anyways, the big thing to understand is that these employers or whatever, right? Because now, click to apply. You don't even have to think about whether you want the job. Again, I think one of the big interesting things with Gen Z, I'm not even nasty with Gen Z about this, is just kind of curious how this whole process is so screwed up, where you have so many, again, apparently the hiring people nowadays, one of their big problems is that Gen Z people don't show up to their first day of work. Because Gen Z will go through the entire hiring process and then realize they don't want the job. They don't even show up. So anyways, I want you to think of the abject cultural disaster the person that's trying to hire you is dealing with. The next thing to think about with a person, most likely that first or second set of interviews that you're going to be dealing with, is the fact is they're not going to be batshit crazy cats, right? They're not going to throw you into the server room or throw you into the dev pit or whatever. Dev pit, right? And see how you interact with the other cats first. Oh no, we got the gatekeepers, the normies, right? The HR people, managers, that type of thing. So when you sit down with them, one of the other things to understand is they got 1,000 resumes. They got to figure out what the hell to do with. And then they've got to sort through people. One of the big things that they need to consider when they're sitting down and interviewing you is, are you going to be an abject disaster for the company, right? So you got a company. Maybe it's 20 people, maybe it's 20,000 people, right? But basically, everybody needs to kind of be working together to push the ball forward, right? Everybody's just like, trying to push the goddamn ball forward. The problem is, when everybody's trying to push the ball forward, it takes a couple of assets, just a few assets, to throw everything off the rails. Again, somebody that hasn't gotten the memo about don't touch the women in the naughty places, preferably don't touch the women, right? Bullies, abusive people, again, identitarians that really care about whatever else, right? So one of the big things with these types of folks that are going to be interviewing you is, one of the big questions that they have to feel comfortable with is that if they let you go through the rest of the hiring process, or if they bring you onto the company, what is the likelihood it's going to turn into a shit show on day 2? Again, are you actually going to show up to work? If they're hiring for a position that needs to get filled and you don't show up, that's a major problem. Again, understand in the technology world, it takes 6 months to 12 months to fully onboard you. They bring you in, you last 3 or 4 months, and then you leave. That's a major problem. You come in and you start saying, "Viva la revolution." It's like, fuck no, stop that, right? That's a problem. Again, are you going to be able to read the documentation? Are you going to be able to do that? And then how are you going to be able to deal with the peers and the bosses and all that kind of stuff? Again, it's interesting. I get a lot of pushback when I talk about things like office politics. Right, Eli, I'm a geek. I'm a geek. Why do you talk about office politics? Because office politics is the grease that makes things move. Again, one of the things I talk about, especially when you do support services and you deal with users, users are both angry and scared of tech people. Right? Tech people are these magicians. Right? They're sitting there at their computers. All of a sudden, the computer breaks for whatever reason, and then they have to call you. And their bonus is on the line, and whether they get chewed out by the boss is on the line, and all kinds of stuff is on the line, whether Outlook or internet or whatever will work, right? So you come, and you're the computer person. And so they're mad. They're internally angry that they're not able to fix the problem. They're internally angry because this is the 10th time this problem has happened this week, right? And then you come and you're like this smug ass 24-year-old or whatever. So they're pissed that you're making twice as much as they are, for Christ's sakes. Yeah, that's its own interesting thing. And then you come and you fix the computer, right? And so one of the interesting things that you can run into is you can both do your job relatively well and still have people hate you at the same time, which sucks. Again, one of the reasons for office politics. So when you come up to the user, hey, know what their name is. So how old is your puppy at this point, right? You got them a couple of months ago. How's that going? How is the potty training with a little chihuahua? I know how that can be with our chihuahua, right? You sit there and you start talking with them so that they perceive you as a human being. You are no longer a geek or tech support. You are a human being that's coming to help them. Hey, good to know about your puppy. Let me just sit down. No problem. We're going to fix the issue. And we've been having this issue a lot lately. Don't worry. Right? Again, that's part of the whole office politics. Going, again, talking to your boss. Not talking to your boss about a promotion. Not talking to your boss about whatever. Just, hey, boss, how's it going? Hey, I saw you got that new BMW. That looks pretty fancy. Yeah. Have you revved it up, gone from 0 to 60? How long does that take, right? You sit there and you talk about other things, right? Because that allows other people to see you as a human being. Understanding how to communicate with people is incredibly important, because here's the thing, right? If you have one cat and one human being, that's bad. If you have one Aspie and one human being, that's bad. That's not going to go particularly well. Probably can still function. I get 2 Aspies. You get two human beings that don't believe being decent human beings is something that needs to happen in an office environment. Again, think about this with so much in the tech world. Again, some of the garbage that we've heard in the tech world over the past decade or so. This whole this whole don't take no for an answer. So you have Aspies that don't take no for an answer. Bad. Just fucking bad. Right? So when you go to the HR person or whatever else, one of the big things that they're trying to figure out is whether hiring you is going to be a abject disaster. And so what you need to do in order to get past the additional doors is you need to prove to them that it's not going to be an abject disaster. So one of the things you need to be thinking about is you need to talk with people, again, do informational interviews or talk with friends or whatever, and find out the things that you do that are disconcerting. I found this with one of the people that came to meet me, right? So I did a Silicon trailer, right? So my wife and I was in the trailer for a year back in 2015, and that's when all these one-on-one sessions started. Anyways, traveled around the country, figured who the hell actually wants to see me. Found out a lot of people did. Anyways, so I was in Niagara Falls. I was in Niagara Falls, I believe. Anyways, and so this guy comes to see me. And again, he's trying to figure out how to get a job in the tech world. So I'm sitting there and I'm talking with him, and we're about 10 minutes into this whole thing. And I look at him. I'm like, look, I gotta stop you. I have to stop this right now for a second. And he's like, what? Why do you have to stop me? And see, the thing was, I spent 10 minutes talking with him. And the entire 10 minutes, he was looking at every other goddamn thing in the world other than me. Like, he's talking. Like, he is listening and talking to me as he's looking at everything in the world other than me. And like, even me, I was like, dude, oh my God, this is making me nauseous. You're moving too much. What the fuck is going on? And he was like, what? I was like, yeah, why don't you ever look at me? Like, what issue is going on here that you just can't just stop for like 2 seconds? And again, the curious thing, again, the weird thing in the world is he said, oh, I was told I shouldn't look at people. Ergo, he's looking at everything in the world other than the person. And again, I've actually talked with somebody else about this, and they have been giving the same advice. And apparently some people, when they stare at, they get fixated. And so then they get a little creepy. They get a little stalkery on you. So you don't want to get stalkery on your HR person. Don't do that. On the other hand, you also don't want to be doing this. Again, the weird thing, people give you advice and then they don't follow up with it. And but again, that was a real thing. I was like, I can goddamn guarantee you why you're not getting hired right now. I can barely stomach sitting with you for like 10 minutes, right? And so one of the things is to sit down with other people and go, what do I have habits? Do I have tics that are annoying as shit? Again, if you sit here and some people just like you can move. Again, with me, again, being an Aspie, it's self-soothing thing. You'll notice I move a lot, but I'm quiet about it. Some people are like, oh my God, if I'm interviewing you and the entire time you're like clicking a pen or like beating on the chair or whatever, again, I'm down to 999 resumes to be dealing with. Right? So one of the things is to go to the people that are around you and say, what tics, what issues do I have that might be off-putting? And you can also sit down and you can ask people to basically do general interviews with you. Like, hey, could you interview me for a job? I don't know how to interview you for a job. Man, motherfucker, just sit there and ask me some goddamn questions that you think would be important when I was getting a job. You can sit there and you can go back and forth. Right? You can see like what weird things are you doing? Along with that, again, with the neurodiversity, is making sure you pay attention to the person, right? Beyond the tics, so the tics are going to annoy the shit out of them, but there's also just expected ways that you should be interacting with people. Again, basically that you should be looking at them a reasonable amount of the time. That you're not stock still. Yes, I know how to fix computer, right? Basically, think about what the normal interactions with people are. Beyond that, things to be thinking about is, again, when you go to the company, one of the big questions that's going to be asked is, why do you want to work for this company? What about this company are you interested in? And the curious thing, what I find really weird about this is, again, I talk with my students about this, and wow, my students are cutting when that comes up. Oh, they're asking, why do I want to work for this company? I don't give a damn about this guy. You're like, oh, fuck. I've actually heard this from many students. Like, they get snarky about it. They get like, when they're asked why they want to work for a company, it's, wow, that's ridiculous. But again, one of the things to be thinking about is if I'm interviewing you, again, the HR person, and one of the questions is whether or not you're going to show up to day one, and also whether or not we're even going to get you a freaking onboarding process that takes a year. Again, why do you want to work for this company? If Silicon Dojo, so with Silicon Dojo, we might be moving to Miami. Anyways, we might be moving to Miami. We go there, there's a good chance it could be more successful. Again, 7 million people versus 90,000 people. But one of the things is, like, if I was going to be hiring people for Silicon Dojo, like, it'll take a special type of person to work for this company. I don't care if you're a rock star. I probably don't want you if you're a rock star. I don't care if you're a ninja or any of this kind of horse crap, right? You need to be able to interact with people. You need to be able to teach people. You need to be able to listen to people. You need to be able to listen and be empathetic with people, but also have a boundary where the empathy stops and you kind of delicately, in a verbal tone, bitch smack them, right? There's this whole thing, right? So if I'm interviewing you, right, and Silicon Dojo can actually pay a salary. I mean, I'm not saying we're going to, but right. If I ask you, why do you want to work for Silicon Dojo? Do you think I would have any interest at all in somebody who just wants a job? Of course not. Fuck off. Right? And I know that sounds like what, but think about that. If you're going to be working for a startup company, if you're going to be working for the enterprise, if you're going to be working for any of these companies, why are you there? If you don't actually know why the hell you want the job, and this is the kind of thing that you need to think about beforehand. So it's like, oh, this is a startup company. I'm really excited, about the particular technology that you're using or whatever else. You being a startup company, again, I'm pretty new in the tech world right now. I think I'll be able to get a tremendous amount of experience, doing a lot of different things. I'm willing, I'm young. I'm willing to work 16 hours a day. I don't want to work 16 hours a day for IBM because they won't even allow me to work 16 hours a day. But, coming to a startup company like this, I mean, it's amazing. If I can come in the morning and I can be working on a server, and then I can do some customer service calls to understand what your customers need. And then past that, I can be working on some Python or some back-end stuff. I mean, that's amazing. If I can come to your company and, if I can work 16 hours, a day for the next 2 years, we can really accelerate this company off the ground. One, I'd like the equity. Equity's nice. And two, I just think this will be a tremendous opportunity for my career, and the technology that you guys are specializing in, right, really is in line with what my interests are. And then you say something. So like, that's one of the things I like about your whatever product. Wow, the way you reskinned Squid proxy server. It was like, I didn't even realize Squid proxy server could be, whatever, massively deployed using Docker, whatever, right? But you go in there, and if you're getting this interview, right, you're going to the interview anyway, You go in, you do basic research about the company before you go to the interview. And then when you come in and people ask, and the person asks you the question, then you can give them an honest answer. And I can tell you, you're going to be doing better than about 80% of the people out there, because I see it in my own students when they get snarky about the idea of, well, the only reason I want this job is for the paycheck. Like, well, we'll see how that works out for you. So that's one of the things to be thinking about beyond the tics or whatever else when you're asked the question. The other thing to be thinking about is when you go in there and you start doing interviews, right? And one of the things with starting to do interviews is, one, actually do interviews. And then two, again, you can have friends interview you. You might even start up a startup. Or start a meetup. Hey, that might be your billion. That's actually not a bad idea. You can start a meetup on practice interviewing, right? There's Toastmasters. Toastmasters is for speeches or whatever. Maybe you could start a startup on practice interviews. And you could invite HR people from local tech companies to come and do demo interviews with the people that show up, so that you get more comfortable what's going on. But one of the big things with that is that you're going to start learning what questions the people are going to ask you. Again, because you're basically dealing with HR, right? You're going to be dealing with HR, that kind of thing, right? So HR people, recruiting people, they're all basically going to be about the same. They're going to ask you a lot of the same questions. So one of the things to start thinking about is figuring out what your answers are beforehand, right? That's one of the things with me being an ASPE is it's very fast conversation is very difficult for me to deal with, especially with that whole nonverbal crap, right? When people start going pitter-patter at 1,000 miles an hour, I lose it. Brain just can't keep up. Again, when a CEO goes off the rails, it's just a bad day. It is just a bad day. So one of the things I learned a long time ago, and one of the reasons that I'm good with doing YouTube videos and all that, is I started pre-planning conversations with things like CEOs and that years ago. Basically, I would have a flow chart. Right? So if I'm selling you a website, if I'm selling a digital surveillance system, I'm selling you a telephone system, whatever else, even when I'm doing this kind of thing, I have a mental flow chart of the topics that I want to talk about, basically what I want to say on those topics, and basically I just follow that flow chart. One of the things I used to tell my employees, right, is a professional answers the questions that the customers do not know to ask. And so one of the ways you can get to that point is by reviewing in your mind, right, the questions, especially like with interviewers, that you've been asked, and then pre-plan to have a better answer, right? If somebody asks you a question and you completely flub it, that's fine. Now go home and figure out what the answer should have been. Right? So the next time you get that same question, because you're going to get that same question again, you have quite literally the perfect answer, right? And one of the things, again, I was talking with a student a couple of days ago about this, and they were like, well, isn't that not genuine? Not genuine. People want genuine. It's like the HR person is going to be happy you put thought into it. You can either give them a genuine garbage answer, or you can have pre-thought and good answer and give it to them. They're most likely going to prefer that decided answer. The other things you can think about too is, again, when you go to interviews, asking the interviewer at the end how it went. Again, I'm an ASPE, so this is the kind of stuff that I do. Look, when I sit down to an interview is a two-party transaction. You're both there, right? I got my questions too. I remember this. So I went and I interviewed for a startup company. And so at the end of it, I was like, so just out of curiosity, how did I do with that interview? And the guy looked at me and was like, you're not getting the job. Like, damn. So I was like, so out of curiosity, what did I do wrong, just so I understand? And one of the curious things is he said, well, I explained to you how our technology worked, and you asked no additional questions. Again, they are a startup company. They're trying to go from 0 to 1,000 miles an hour in 5 days. And so I went in there and I wasn't curious about the things that he was saying. And so again, he's like, I don't need somebody like that. I need somebody that's actually interested, again, in what we're doing. The other thing is, again, that's where I answered computers, where he was like, well, what do you want to do with your career? And again, I gave the answer you all give: computers, basically. And he was like, yeah, that's not an answer. I know you think that's an answer, and that's the bigger problem, right? So one of the things you can do is you can ask the interviewers at the end, basically, how did that go? And I think these are some of the things to be thinking about, like as a neurodivergent person, when you go in to do these interviews, you're play acting. And I'm going to say something, again, you're not supposed to say this. Not supposed to say this. But it's true. Nobody cares about you. Again, maybe your mom, maybe your mommy does, your daddy does, your spouse does. But when you go into these interviews, they do not care about you. They are inspecting a cog. They're inspecting a cog. They're inspecting a sprocket. That's what they're doing. Is there rust on this cog? Oh, there's a little bit of rust on this cog. But I can get this cog for 10% cheaper than the perfectly clean cog. Oh, this cog is made out of aluminum. This cog is made out of steel. But the cog's not really doing a lot, to be honest with you. So if I get this cog for 50% off the steel one, I'll get that, right? When you're going in to do these interviews, when you're interacting with people, you are play acting. It is a character. The entire world is a stage. And you're in a really crappy sitcom that airs at 3:30 in the morning that only high and drunk people are watching, right? So you go in there and you play a part. And something to think about is as you get your job, if you get the job, that you continue to play the part. One of the interesting things that I heard, because again, I sit back and I listen to people. Again, social justice went off the rails. What happened to social justice? One of the curious things, right? So I go out and I listen. I listen to, again, lots of people that don't look like me. They got bits that I don't have and don't look like me in the whole 9 yards. And one of the fascinating things I've heard over the past couple of years, and again, I think it's with the insidiousness of 1% interest rates and more people getting hired, right? One of the big things you hear from people that don't look like me, and the issue when they get into corporate environments, is they're not like white guys. They don't want to be just ticky-tacky, coming out of a cookie cutter form and doing what they're supposed to do. Eli, I understand, Eli, that as a white guy, you're happy with your cookie cutter lifestyle. But somebody like me, we need something different. It's like, oh, damn. Where has social justice gone wrong? Because here's the thing with a lot of the cookie cutter white guys, the cookie cutter white guys don't necessarily want to be cookie cutter white guys. But they play the part to get the job, right? Again, I was in the military years ago. Part of things going through the military, they were talking about like customs, like why you salute, why you do these types of things. Anyways, one of the big things in the book, there's a book, the Smart Book that we had to read. In the Smart Book, one of the things it was talking about is the point of shaking hands. Why do people shake hands? And it was talking about it back in the day again, especially if you're right-handed. Your right-handed is your sword hand. So the idea is I put out my hand to shake your hand to show that I'm not a threat. If I'm shaking your hand, I can't stab you. Unless I'm left-handed. Anyways, right, that's the thing, right? And so one of the things to be thinking about, like in a business environment, so much of a business environment is the metaphor of putting out your hand to basically say, I'm not a threat. We are in this together. What do we need to do? The issue that we've gotten with identitarianism, whatever identity, again, the alpha dogs, I'll beat up on the alpha dogs, right? And the pastel people, but I'll beat up on the alpha dogs too, is this whole people aren't putting out their hand. Why should I shake the hand of somebody that I don't like? Because you got to work together. Because the ball needs to go down the goddamn field and your boss really doesn't give a fuck if you all like each other or not. As long as you can work together to move the ball down the field, everybody can get their pay and benefits. Again, bigger issues that have come down the pike. Why should I shake the hand of somebody that's not pure? They voted for the wrong Oh, God. God. Right back in the day, 20 years ago, I didn't have to like you to get shit done. I did a lot of work with people I didn't necessarily like or respect, but they were good at what they did. Wow, you just run the shit out of that fiber optic cable and never come to my house. You come to my house, I'm gonna fucking put a hatchet in your head, but you can run some damn good fiber optic cable. Right? But I think that's one of the big issues that we see now. And again, especially with the identitarianism, right? And the neurodivergent. You need to treat me. If you do not treat me in the way that I expect, I'm not going to shake your hand. And where does that get your career? Where does that get you? I don't know. Right? And so I think that's the thing to be thinking about. When you're going through that HR process, you want them to feel that you're going to be on the team. That you're going to shake your peers' hands, your team members' hands. You're going to shake the boss's hand. You're going to shake the customer's hand. And these people are your peers, and it's the boss, and it's the customer. And you're going to come in, and you're going to do your work. And you're going to do whatever is required, for the most part, in order to make things work smoothly, right? Sometimes to make things work smoothly, right? You sit there and spend 24 hours rebuilding a goddamn server. And sometimes to make things work smoothly, you drop a happy birthday card on one of your peers' desks. That happy birthday card can be just as valuable as rebuilding a server for 24 hours. Why do you do it? Because you need to move the ball forward. The people that help move the ball forward are the ones that are going to be more successful in life. So anyways, there's some things to think about. So you go in and you play act. You be a part. You be a white guy, a cookie cutter white guy. I think about that with, I had one of my last employees, great guy, terrific guy. But anyways, he was from the inner city. Inner city. He took off his shirt. He looked like fucking Frankenstein. Oh, yeah. Knife wound. Oh, he had been sliced and diced. But anyways, right? I think that was an interesting thing, right? So good guy though, and he was dealing with the shop. And a customer came in. The customer was being unreasonable. And so anyways, the guy called me. He's like, "Yeah, Eli." So the customer came in, being unreasonable or whatever else. I'm like, "Okay. So what did you do?" He's like, "Don't worry, Eli. I stared him down." It's like, excuse me? I stared him down. Oh, fuck. We do not stare our customers down. And that was the interesting thing. Again, I go in, and I go talk with my employee, the conversations you don't think you're going to have as a boss. And I'm like, what the hell's going on? He's like, came in, he disrespected you, he disrespected me, being completely unreasonable, and I wanted him to understand. I was like, oh, God, dude. Yeah, okay. And that's where I came up with a white boy after an orgasm. And I was like, look, man, look. Here's the deal. I want you to treat the customers like you're a white boy after an orgasm. Hi, how you doing? How can I have... What do you think was not up to snuff with our service? Okay, I'm gonna write all that down, and I'm gonna give this information to Eli, the computer guy, and he will let me know what we can do about your problem. Again, the curious part was, he was like, yeah, Eli, you know where I live, right? I was like, yeah, sort of. He was like, yeah, if I look like that when I go home, yeah, that's probably true. Again, an interesting thing with social justice. What happens when in a business environment you need to be soft, but in a home environment you need to be as hard as steel? Because if you go to your home environment and you're soft, your neighbors will literally club you the fuck over the head. Interesting question. I don't have the answer. It's one of the questions. But I think that was an interesting thing, though. Again, it's that whole, you're playing a part. You're playing a character within the business environment. There you go. There are some thoughts. Hope they made a darn bit of sense. Neurodiversity, interviews, life skills, the whole 9 yards. Again, I ain't normal. I ain't normal. But apparently people think I play one on YouTube. Again, I think that's one of the interesting things. I get so many people. Eli, you can't be autistic. You're so normal. It's like, fuck you. Fuck you, go to hell. Do you know how much energy it's taking right now not for me not to tell you exactly what I think about you right now? It's very hard. But I am playing a white boy after an orgasm. So anyways, there you go. There you go, boys and girls. Take that, leave that. See y'all later.